I've had the opportunity to sit down with several of the candidates so far, and this week I had a chance to chat with Andy Hogue, who's running for mayor here in Leander. I hope you enjoy our conversation. We're back here at Lantern Media Studios for the continuation of the Vote in Leander series here on the Lean in Leander podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Naudine, and with me today is mayoral candidate Andy Hogue.
Hey, it's
Andy,
good to be here.
Thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, great studio you've got here.
Well, it's not mine, but, they let me borrow it.
Oh, that's right. Make use of the space when you got it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, this is really, honestly, plug for Lantern Media. This has been a wonderful experience, given that I'm typically working, with my own gear. It's a little low tech compared to this, but, it gets the job done. But this is really, it's been fun. I mean, it's kind of nice to come here and do this.
Yeah.
Makes me feel all official and stuff. Anyway, thanks for taking the time. I really do appreciate it because I know, people are busy and, you have normal life stuff to do. So it's always nice to be able to, find a time that accommodates both of us. So I appreciate that very, very much. And I look forward to our conversation here today.
Yeah, likewise.
So, all right. So, Andy, I know a little bit about you. I don't know a whole lot of stuff. But I do like to start with the origin story, if you will, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about where you're from, what brought you to Leander, and then we'll go from there.
Well, it starts in rural Denton County. That's where I spent most of my time growing up. And as you know, anything north of DFW got gobbled up slowly, just like what's happening in the Austin area. I'm sure it's a very familiar story. As a matter of fact, I spent time in Argyle, Texas, which had a direct rail line, and I moved to Leander, and I kept on having deja vu and thinking, wow, this is very similar. But anyway, I moved to the Austin area in 2008. I was a newspaper reporter and got very involved in uncovering toll road. I hate to say scandals in a nice podcast, but there's
a lot of, I mean, if that's how you framed them, right?
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of question marks and unanswered questions and things that we weren't getting answers for, like how many overpasses do we get? How many underpasses? How will this affect farmers and ranchers? How can an ambulance get around the barriers? Good questions to have, and I found out I was getting in a lot of trouble from people with 512 area codes.
Okay.
Anyway, go to the Republican convention that summer and got offered a job with Lone Star Report. They put me in as transportation editor and a few other positions too, healthcare policy and some other side gigs, and I had a great time. I spent 3 years in the Capitol Press Corps, and I've lived here ever since. I moved to Leander in 2013. My wife and I got married. My wife, Katrina, she's a worship singer. She's lived here since, 2004, I think, but she had most of her home paid off, and I said, let's stay here.
Okay, nice.
And we had a kid within our first year of marriage, so before you know it, one morning I woke up with a Mustang convertible, a condo in Austin, and not far from the Capitol. And one morning I woke up and noticed I had a minivan, a mortgage, and 3 kids.
There you go.
Life
That's how it
happens
goes,
fast.
right? That's
And
exactly how it goes.
That's my Leander origin story.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. No, that's nice. I appreciate you sharing. And I'm sure the people who frequent the podcast and the YouTube and all that other good stuff will appreciate it as well. A nice background. So since you're kind of you have a little bit of a journalist in you and hopefully can appreciate some of what we do here from that perspective. In Leander, you said 2013, so about 10 years now, right? Have you seen, I mean, you've been here 10 years, so you've seen a lot of the growth. You've seen a lot of what's happened here in Leander, the way that things have, exponentially exploded. I mean, I talk about that all the time.
Yeah.
It's crazy, right? Like, I've only been here, 6 years. And even in the 6 years that I've been here, it's just been, it's mind-boggling how
those are
quickly it
6
went.
very monumental years.
No, they are. I mean, you throw
yeah.
a pandemic into the middle of that and everything else. I mean, it's pretty crazy.
That's the star on the bingo card. We just don't count that one.
Yeah, that's the free pass, right?
Right, exactly.
So you've been here for 10 years and you've kind of seen all of this happening and around you. What other type of I like to refer to it as like service orientation, but what other type of community engagement, community volunteerism, what else have you done prior to this? And then we'll talk a little bit about what's motivating you to make this move.
Yeah, well, as you might know, having children kind of becomes your big community focus. And I'm head of the parent taxi committee right now. That's my main hat I wear. But before, I did a lot of things. Before I moved to Austin, being a reporter takes a lot of your time as well. A lot of the capital activities kind of take precedence,
Sure,
and
sure.
also traffic keeps you from being a lot
Sure.
more involved in your neighborhood. You get home at 7:30 and half the year it's dark.
Yep.
So, well, in Gainesville and Valley View, Texas, some other places in North Texas and Denton, I stayed very active. I was involved with Optimist International. I was a chapter president. I was involved with an after-school program. Let's see what else. Keep Texas Beautiful. We started a chapter in my hometown of Valley View, which had 600 people, now 800. So the explosive growth hasn't caught up to Valley View yet. But we did restore our town square.
Okay.
So we got an offer from the governor's office. We got about, I think it was $10,000, but that goes a long way in a small town.
Sure.
We took a working square that's mostly just parking and agricultural storage, and we turned it into an actual catalyst for economic growth. And now the square has bounced back, and there's restaurants, distilleries. It reminds you a lot of what's going on in Leander right now with the economy, but before food trailers. So that was quite a feat. But,
right. No,
very involved church, community activities. So I've stayed quite active. I can give you the resume some other time, perhaps.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You give me plenty to work with right there.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I picked up on there, and I'd love to talk to you about more when we're done with this. So I'm involved with the Leander Foundation here in Leander.
Yes.
Carlos St. James.
Yeah, great work.
Yeah, he does some really great work, and I'm pleased to have been invited to join that board. And it's been a nice little exercise as we kind of start to get our legs under us and whatnot, and kind of figure out how to make that thing work. But one of the things that's come up from that, or begat of the foundation, was Keep Leander Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd love to, at very least, invite you to one of our board meetings. Maybe you can give us a little bit of insight. Right?
I need to be there.
Right? No, I think
yes.
I think that would be very beneficial to that conversation because my wife actually serves on that board.
Wonderful.
With Keep Leander Beautiful. So I think that is something that I would love to explore with you further. But that's great stuff. So obviously, some orientation, us kids, like you said, that tends to do that, right? You end up being, whether you do it or you're sucked into it, either way, you end up being involved. What is it that now, at this point, 10 years into your life here in Leander, what is it now that motivates you to say, you know what, I'm gonna step into the public square. I'm gonna make myself a public figure for all extents and purposes. What motivates you today?
Being a glutton for punishment.
Well, there is that.
But seriously, I think it's a certain type. Being behind the scenes, being behind the camera, working with in media relations, which I've done for a long time with the Travis County Republican Party especially. Some people said, Andy, I think you have imposter syndrome. I think you like working with candidates and pretending you're them sometimes. No, this is just where my skills are, know.
Right.
But it just kind of dawned on me after all the problems we've had finding quality candidates. And let's face it, a lot of people are leaving the Austin area. They're going elsewhere. Right. Or they're finding out they can work from home, so they don't want to fight the traffic anymore. Mm-hmm. And we're losing some great talent up the road. So I thought I would be a hypocrite if I didn't try to run for something. So for the past 2 years or so, I've been beating the tires and trying to find a good fit. And this seemed like a good use of my talents. I was looking at council before. There was an open seat. But really, mayor seems to be a great fit. It's not a recall election. We're not ousting the current mayor. It's just the term's up. And I think that's the best use of my talents and my background. I do think that with the mayor's office, I have a chance to broker the peace. That's something I've kind of excelled in over the years. I can tell you more later, but I'm good with small groups. I'm good with building consensus, and I'm really good at running meetings. I don't know where that skill comes from, but I haven't really got to try that much in my life, but every time I have, it's been great.
Right.
Maybe the outcome's not perfect, but the meeting's been perfect. So.
Yeah, no, I also have that skill set. Unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know how you want to put that necessarily. But yeah, no, I had the opportunity to kind of step into a leadership role on the Economic Development Committee.
Yeah.
Not by choice. I mean, it was kind of like, hey, you're the last one left kind of thing, So yeah, but that ended up, I didn't really know that I had that skill set to run effective meetings, and that's a good skill to have.
Yeah,
frankly.
It really is. Yeah.
So straight into mayor, I mean, obviously, if you looked at a council position before, then obviously And I always like to bring this up because I think it's an important point for the viewers to understand that all of the positions in Leander are essentially volunteer.
Right.
There's no one's getting really paid for anything. I think there's some stipends and stuff like that for a little travel and whatnot that happens. But beyond that, there's no paycheck or anything like that. So everybody's basically volunteering their time for, what in all essence, and I always frame it this way, these are my words. This is not necessarily how other people may describe, but it's an advisory for the most part, right? Because you've got city staff that are actually executing all the stuff at the end of the day, right? But the council serves in that position of, kind of advising and steering budget and ordinances from that perspective. Mayor is a little different, though. I always like to point out that the mayor takes on a leadership role within that group, right? So the mayor provides a little bit more direction, a little bit more vision from that perspective. Sets the agendas, decides what's important, or prioritizes. I shouldn't say what's important because everything's important, but helps prioritize that. And you want to do that.
Well, as a reporter, I spent the better part of a decade spending my evenings watching council meetings, watching county commissioner meetings, watching water board meetings, watching a justice of the peace sale one time. They had to auction off some property and things like that. Very hard to keep a relationship during those years. But I tell you what, I spent my time watching, and I think the most admiration I've had is for somebody that can sit there and, again, moderate that discussion when everybody has a different angle or nobody's listening to each other, and someone that can just broker the peace and keep the business going, keep the train going, and end the agenda within 2 hours. That's somebody I admire a lot.
Yeah, no, anybody who can actually do that, I mean, they deserve admiration, right?
That's right.
Because those meetings typically end up going a lot longer than when you anticipate, right?
Much longer, sometimes into the wee hours of the morning, 2 a.m. One time we spent an all-nighter, and I got home around 6 a.m.
Yeah.
And then right back to work.
That's not fun.
Punch the card. No.
Well, but I mean, it's part and parcel of what an expectation, so to speak, right?
So I hate to say with Leander, I'm just jumping in. It seems like I've been in the world for a long time. I've watched a lot of meetings online. I've followed. I've worked with some candidates over the years. And so I feel like while I haven't been a staple at the council meetings, I mean, really, what percentage of Leander residents are at the council meetings? Very seldom, very few.
Very true.
So, I think we need, again, somebody who both understands the system and is a regular, paycheck to paycheck person on the council. That would be a great boon for the city, of somebody to be mayor that is in that role. And, we're not banking it either. We're just like everybody else. And I was debt-free till about age 36. Then we had kids. But, we need the voices of just regular workaday folks on the council. And I believe I'm this strange Archaeopteryx between the two worlds. So I've got to run for it. This is a rare opportunity for me.
No, and I can definitely see where you're kind of coming to that conclusion. Again, I'm not super familiar with your background, but I know enough to where I know where you're coming from, right?
Sure.
So, I mean, obviously. So you're kind of already touching on it, but like outline for the audience what you think, what would you say are your unique qualifications? Like if you were to ask, well, I'm asking you the question. what are your unique qualifications? What do you think you bring to the table that maybe sets you apart?
Well, I'd like to say I would continue the communications improvement. There's been a lot of improvement. I think Leander's been growing up over the past decade or so I'd like to continue that. But I think you need to bring some passion to the table. Right now, it seems that there's a lot of disconnect. For instance, when I filed, did anybody call me? No one wanted to know more about me or figure out what was going on or what my game was. It was just sort of like that. And not to really dig at anybody in particular, but I've noticed that in a lot of policy situations as well. No one's really working the phones. No one's talking to the developers besides people that get paid to do so. But we need the representatives of the people to get involved and actually care. And I think that would be worth its weight in gold, is just to lift the phone and start caring about the town. Are we talking to Liberty Hill about their water shortage they're going to deal with? They're going to be in the same place we are right now very soon. Things like that. I think we can solve a lot of problems. We can accelerate the building of the senior center. I know there's a lot of background there and running out of money situations too. But there are things we can do if we would just lift the phone, and we can prevent a lot of these pinch points from occurring with a little more compassion and a little forward planning. So that's one thing I like to bring to the council.
I think those are good points. I definitely concur from the perspective of, just the communication part of it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that's part and parcel of what we do here on the podcast is try to open up some of those lines of communication and help people understand what some of the thought processes are. The policy making and the decision making is more complex and can sometimes be convoluted from that perspective as well.
That's right.
But that's the reality of the job, so to speak, right?
Yeah,
That's
and
just
a
how
city our
things go.
side, when we farm out a lot of that.
Right. No, and I mean, you would hope that there are communications with our neighboring cities and some planning being done there. There's
plenty.
some visibility to that. It's not completely transparent, and there's reasons for that too,
Sure,
right?
contractual, yes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So you always kind of want to thread that needle when you're in the public square, and it's nice to hear that, definitely, because I think, again, I would say your background probably lends that, right? It just, you have had that exposure, you have had that experience in the past, and so it's a little bit more, I don't want to say secondhand, but like it's easier for you, right? That's where your thought process is.
That's exactly where it's easy for me. Best job I ever had was with City of Austin District 6. The council member, Don Zimmerman, think what you want to about Don, but one thing Don does is he gets things done.
Right.
And he wanted a council satellite office. He says nobody in District 6 in the northwest corner of Austin or out by Steiner, it's kind of the outward fringe, the Deep Space Nine, of the the city. He says no one's really going downtown for business. They're just not. They're just going to complain and not take care of things, and they're the least represented. So he opened up his old campaign office, flipped it over, gave it to the city of Austin, basically, and started a field office. But he needed somebody to run it. So I took one of the shifts. I took the afternoon shift, loved it, worked its way into a full-time job. And I could tell you stories of what all it took was somebody to, leave the desk and go work with a constituent and solve a water bill dispute, or go solve anything from a broken bike path to getting rid of or adding a speed bump, things like that. But that's what woke me up. I thought, this is what I'm good at. And not just taking the complaint and putting it in the machine, but following up sometimes years later. And someone picked up the phone and says, oh, wow, I can't believe you're following up. This never got finished. And that's really what kind of woke up, or I guess reawoke in my community service angle. I spent a long time in Capitol politics, City of Austin politics, and, you get kind of jaded.
Sure.
But that really, gave me, it kickstart my interest in.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would say, just that experience of engagement, right?
Yes.
Like just understanding. And I like to talk about the representative part of anyone who is, putting themselves on, whether it's put forth for council or put forth for mayor. It's a representative type of position, specifically here in Leander, because everybody's at large, right? So to your point, if you're not engaging with the community, if you're not out there actually, and it goes beyond attending, ribbon cuttings and things of that nature. In my opinion, this is strictly my opinion, right? It is more about that. I think, understanding that there's an issue on a road. This is always my go-to. I don't understand how, from a planning perspective, that there is not enough, or in my opinion, there's not enough focus on finishing out Lakeline to Hero, right? It's where I live, so it's in my backyard, right? So admittedly, it is something that I see every day, so it's a little bit more pronounced to me. But when I look at that and the way that the developments were built and the way that the developers were allowed to develop out there, it seems to me a miss. It's like, well, that Lakeline is a large conduit. It's not a main street by any stretch, but it's a large conduit, and there's a lot of traffic on Lakeline coming all the way up to Leander, all the way up to the schools and Crystal Falls. That's when I got here, that you could already see that, right? Then you drive a little bit further down Lakeline, and all of a sudden it contracts to 2 lanes. Right. And you're like, okay, well, why did you do that? That doesn't make any sense. Just go ahead and plan out 4 lanes, finish them up, do all the way through to Hero. Because once you see that, and then you're headed towards Nameless, but there's traffic there too, right? So those are the types of things that I think get, unfortunately, and I know why. I mean, sometimes it's monetary, sometimes it's just from a planning perspective and having to shift things around to address some of the more pressing needs. That makes sense, right?
Oh, sure.
But it's,
pick any direction.
Sure, yeah, absolutely, and especially during this time frame, right? While we were going through what we've been going through now with just the massive expansion of the city. And again, I'm always very fond of saying, look, nobody could have really predicted that, right? You could have maybe anticipated it, but you wouldn't have known when it was going to happen. And it all happened at once.
Right.
So you're playing catch up regardless of how well of a planner you would have had to be in, clairvoyant to be able to really understand that in its full, right?
It's true.
So anyway, but those are, I agree with you, because I do think that is something that, when a candidate has considered or a candidate is able to either, directly or indirectly get that type of feedback. Directly is better, in my opinion, but, hey, that's just me. But yeah, no, I appreciate that. I do.
Yeah, well, not to get into the politics of it all, but at the 20,000-foot level, I think we got two real choices. We can slow down growth and wait for things to catch up.
Sure.
And say, okay, we'll put a moratorium on this development. Or we can turbocharge our tax base and be able to afford the things that we need to not only, pay for a right turn lane and relieve some of that traffic, but also to negotiate with the developers. Right now, we are absolutely addicted to developer fees.
Yeah.
And we don't have the gravitas to come in and say, okay, we don't like this, or we want some natural vegetation.
Right.
Or we want a little bit of extra thoroughfare to make up for the congestion. We don't really have that negotiating power right now because we don't have the big enough tax base. So recruiting businesses and industry to come to Leander, we've got to get commercial. That's going to be priority number one for me. So I choose that latter option. I think we ought to embrace growth. And again, if we can't, then maybe moratoriums are the option. But in a community is growing as fast as Leander, I think we need to get on the train and just really saddle up and let's get our commercial industries in this town here.
Yeah, I would concur. I mean, again, having had some exposure there, I won't pretend to be an expert by any stretch of the imagination, but I mean, diversification of the tax base is key to that type of growth.
Yes.
And you cannot. I've been party and have been privileged to be in on a couple of conversations where the idea of remaining a bedroom community and using property tax as the primary vehicle for funding the growth of the city and stuff like that.
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that should you choose that direction,
no,
right?
Not at all.
If it's something you decide to do, then hey, that's the type of city that you want to be in.
But we can't be 100% bedrooms.
No, you can't. You can't. And I think that was part of, again, some of the consideration, previously, not necessarily the last, election cycle, but maybe 2-3 election cycles down, when this was, starting to bubble up. I don't think there was a whole lot of consideration there, and it's difficult if you don't have the staff to support it as well. So that's always been a little bit of a problem and a drag on the propulsion forward, right?
Yes.
Nobody's fault. It has nothing to do with anything other than just you went from 30-ish thousand to 80,000 and almost overnight, right? And that's a lot to deal with. And so you have to adjust, and that takes a little bit of time. I think, in my opinion, I think we have made some of those adjustments, and I think some of the development that we're seeing around does indicate that, right?
Absolutely.
It starts to indicate that, okay, there's a diversification there in the way that we're approaching, the land that we do have to develop. But I also think it's really important for people to understand that, Samsung and Tesla, they were never in the cards, right? That was never going to happen out here. It's not the right place for them to be. So when you hear those comparisons, and we hear it a lot, like, Hutto always comes up, like what Hutto's doing. I'm like, well, but that's a different scenario, right?
They got flatter land.
They have flatter land. They're in a different, demographic.
Cheaper land.
Absolutely. And just, this
less federally regulated land.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. There's so many other things that they don't have to deal with. I think the one common tie between all of the different cities is obviously the long-term ability to support the communities with growth. From the water perspective, and I know that the city has done, quite a bit to course correct on water. Whether those decisions could have been made earlier, that's arguable. How we move forward, again, somewhat arguable, right? There's a couple of different ideas that you can approach and different ways to do that. But I think, again, it's kind of, at least we're growing up. And I think you said it earlier, like the city's kind of growing up a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think we're probably early adolescents, maybe.
Maybe later.
Still a little bratty,
Jingling the keys.
Jingling the keys. Can we drive this thing? Anyway, so we talk about growth, and one of the things that's always important to discuss when you're having that growth conversation is, how do you responsibly grow, right? How do you ensure that there's a balance between the aforementioned needs, right? The diversification of the tax base, and then, the small town ethos, right?
Right.
What's the balance there? What are your thoughts on that type of question?
Oh, that's a great question. That's the big thing you get. You either get people that want Trader Joe's right now, and they want, Leander to be an extension of Austin. They want the domain up here, and then really with Northline, we might get that. Unfortunately, I think we're getting more apartments lately, but, And then you got the other people that want Leander to stay the way it was. And, man, I love those people. They remind me of the folks I grew up around, and I just want to hug them and say, I know my mom and dad live on 10 acres, and they're getting surrounded very slowly. The dairy farm right next to them just got bought out, So I feel you, man. I really do. And I just realized I'm keeping my sunglasses on. There we go.
Don't worry about that.
There we go, yeah.
I hadn't noticed.
There we go, yeah. But I do think that one thing you've got to do is realize that if growth is inevitable, then we have to manage it correctly.
Right.
And if a lot of us moved here for the vistas and valleys that we come to know and love about the hill country, then let's keep those. And there's ways to do that. But again, you need a diverse economy and a wide tax base to be able to negotiate. Otherwise, we're kind of beholden to whatever the developer wants.
Sure.
And I drive by a new development. I won't name it. I love that they brought houses to my neighborhood. I love that they've master planned it. But, man, they've got frontage that's just all it is unused property with irrigation. And yeah, the grass is starting to turn yellow lately because of stage 4. But oh my gosh, why in the world? Before it was cedar trees and native grasses. If you left it alone, it would have been just fine during the summer. It would have turned different colors until September. Then it would have turned white, But it would have looked great. It would have looked hill country. But they had to put patties of grass down. Why? Because a lot of times the developing company does not live here. They don't.
Right.
They don't know what we have. They don't know what kind of treasure we have. And again, lifting the phone and talking to them, sharing our vision, and getting excited about it. Man, we've got to do. That being on an economic development committee. If we don't do that, then that's to our dismay. But I think, again, to preserve the small town, we've got to understand the small town, can communicate that, and tell people why it's important to preserve it, and maybe do some things that have never been done in a town before.
Right.
Maybe we can be the innovative hub in Texas. I don't know, but we could do something completely different that nobody's seen before. But we've got to have the vision.
No, I agree, and I would say that in many conversations I've had, in the past and even more recently, to me that's one thing that has been a consistent missing element from the conversations here in Leander. Because I remember when I first started to get involved and started to serve on committees and have conversations and be part of the mayor's advisory and stuff like that. I spent some time working with the chamber here, just kind of trying to get a feel for like, okay, who's who, what's what, and how do we work, right? Just kind of understand it. But vision and an overarching understanding of where we were going it's been a constant, in my opinion. And that's not a bump against anybody, who has served, who is serving, who might serve.
No, not at all.
It's just there's I wouldn't frame it that this is the wrong term because of the way it sounds, but it is somewhat of an identity crisis, right? It's like we don't really know what Leander's going to become, so we don't know how to necessarily express what we want it to be in many ways. There are ways to address that. I think the forthcoming 183 survey and that particular project, I think that's going to help a lot with that. Like that corridor study,
tremendously.
I think that helps a lot, right? It starts to get some ideas out there. But I would argue here too, there needs to be some leadership in presenting ideas too. It's one thing to wait for people to tell you what they think and to digest that and have conversations. But at the same time, there is a need for ideas to be put out there. I had one of the interviews, we talked about this, And it's like, there's no real crazy idea anymore, right? It's just different ideas, just different ways to do things. So put them out there. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is that they don't work. I mean, that's the worst thing that can happen,
Well, that's
right?
the great thing about an idea. It doesn't have to work.
Right.
It's an idea.
It's an idea. So you just put them out there, just see what happens, and at least start the conversation, right?
Yes.
Get the idea.
Make it a plan.
Absolutely. It turns into a plan after time, in my opinion. I mean, again,
Correct.
I think it's always interesting to sit down with the candidates to kind of explore that a little bit. Like, hey, so how would we do this? So what is the vision, right?
Well, and in a word, with our candidates, and I'm not naming any names or name any factions or slates, but we've got a whole crop of candidates that are like nothing I've ever seen in Leander. I mean, whoever wins, we're going to be a step forward, especially some of the newcomers. We've got some fresh blood. We've got some talent we've never had before, and it might be just another expression of Leander growing up. But I think either way, after this next election, you're going to see a lot more talent and a lot more drive on the council we've had before. But when I first started out here, we were still kind of on the tail end of this. Well, it's your turn to be on the council. You're in the fire department, so hey, represent the fire department. That kind of thing, and that's great.
Yeah.
But like you said, it doesn't pay a cent. And if you're busy being a firefighter or busy commuting downtown and fighting traffic, you don't really have a lot of time to read the council packet.
Right, and I think to a degree as well, I would argue that if that being the case, and that was what happened a lot of times, you're too close to it, right? It kind of it deafens the room for any new ideas because you kind of fall back into that's the way we've always done it,
Exactly.
right? And I think I think there's a maturation in the city, and there's opportunity to bring in new ideas and bring in new voices. And I always, from my perspective, again, what I do here is just about the conversation. This is you and me sitting around having a beer and having a chat, right?
Yeah, where's the beer?
Where's the beer? Right.
Leanderfall's next door, right?
Yeah, we can head over there. But that's the point. Is that I hope this helps with anybody who would have an opportunity and not be able to sit down with you and have that one-on-one conversation, right?
Yes.
I hope that I'm representing the types of questions that people should ask or would ask.
This
right?
is what I'm hearing at the door. What you're saying is exactly what I'm hearing.
At the door.
At the door. Knocking on doors and talking.
Oh,
yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
Well, when you run for office, you got to knock on a door. Yeah.
Yeah, the block walking.
I'm
right?
not doing enough of that lately. Don't tell my investors, but
Yeah, I agree. I think that is a way to be able to do that. Now, our community has grown so much that there's a lot of walking now.
Oh, and lots of hills.
Yeah, right. A bicycle maybe? I don't know. Maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think I've had candidates come to my door, which is always interesting because typically they don't know that I live there, right? And they show up and like, oh, you live here. I was like, yeah, I do. Anyway, but it's nice to see that done. I mean, and we're still smallish enough that you can get a good chunk of that type of direct engagement, right?
Yes.
We're not so small anymore that it's 2-3 communities, and it's a barbecue and everybody shows up.
Oh,
right?
no, I've already had things that I've said at the door get back around to me 2 hours later somehow. It's just Leander.
Yeah, no, well, and social media too. I mean,
that's true.
You have those conversations. Was it Next Door is one of those? Like that one.
Yeah.
Just that's a conduit. Like people know stuff right away.
Oh my gosh, Next Door, yeah.
So we've talked about a couple of other things, and again, I appreciate you kind of just following me down the little path that I set out, and again, I don't want to get too deep into any one political idea or thought or whatever. It's just more conversational, just to get some of your ideas out there, right? Just to help you kind of express what it is that you think. So transparency and accountability is always something that comes up at some point or another. And so you've had a unique experience from that perspective, having done the journalistic side of that, right? Where you are pushing for transparency. Right? So how do you answer that question? I mean, I think you've kind of touched a little bit on it, but let's speak to that question specifically. What are some of your ideas on how the city can be more transparent or more communicative from that perspective? Okay.
Well, you can start a blog, you can start a podcast, and the problem is who's going to listen to it? Who's going to take the time to break their routine and stop, a kid's soccer practice to watch the video or read the blog?
Right.
So that's the problem. How do we bridge that gap? So, and of course, that's the million-dollar question. I think elected officials and appointed officials everywhere want to know the answer to that. But again, I think listening is the most important thing, and not just being a good listener, being a responsive listener. So trying to find out where the demand is. What are people concerned about? Well, right now they're concerned about water.
Sure.
They're concerned about traffic. And I think if we advertised forums about that better, we could get a large crowd to these things. One example, we got Raider Way over by Rouse High School where my kids go, and that is being rebuilt during school hours, and maybe they can't help it. Maybe it's just they got to do it during the springtime. I don't know the reasons behind it. I'd like to read a little more about that. But people have questions. Now, I've been told there was a hearing at Wiley High School. I don't know. Maybe I missed it. And here I am, Mr. Plugged In, Mr. Political, Mr. Communications Director, and somehow I totally missed it. Now, how did I miss it? That's to my chagrin. But that's also a motivation that if I missed it, how many other people missed it? So I think asking the questions and following up and seeing, okay, where's the demand and where are the people asking the questions? Where are they right now? How do I go to them? Right. And that's how we get them to listen. That's how we engage them. So there may not be one clear answer to that, but communications has to be active. You can't just, yak, and someone's going to say, hey, you're doing a great job. Keep it up,
Yeah, no. Yeah. And to that, again, I think, public notice and providing for, mechanisms for people to comment and whatnot, that's all well and good, right? But I think you bring up a really, really good point, and I'm happy to hear it, actually, is that you have to take some initiative to meet the people where they are. And that goes beyond the election cycle, right? I think what unfortunately happens is that, the election cycle, there's a lot of that engagement. There's just natural, the bloom of the political signage, it's just, it happens. You can kind of count on it.
Yeah. Guilty.
It's just part of the process.
But it doesn't require any water.
Good point. Good point. All right. That's actually, you're the first one to say that. That's actually funny. But yeah, I mean, but you do get that during this period of time, and then not so much. I'm not saying not at all, but by any stretch am I saying that. That's not the case. There is plenty of opportunity to engage after the election cycle. But again, to me, it's like, well, this is a volunteer position, right? So yes, there's a cadence to the way that you do the work that you do. And there's a lot of other stuff that you end up doing as well. Like I've had the conversation with multiple candidates that, you frame it as bi-monthly for 3 years, right? That's a long commitment. But then that turns into, bi-monthly for 3 years plus, ribbon cuttings plus additional meetings plus,
working the phones,
engagements on. And so you quickly, and I don't think it's anything that's necessarily malicious, right? I don't mean it that way. You just quickly get sucked into that world and you forget or don't have time for the outreach, the one-on-one conversations, I'm going to be here and y'all come and give me a chat, let me know what you're thinking. I'd love to see more of that.
That's a very somber point. You get so involved in the in-world, you forget about
and it's not
churches, everything do that.
Everything gets that way, right? And everybody's busy, and everybody kind of goes about their own thing. But at the end of the day, if you want to be, and again, speaking strictly for myself, if you want to be involved in something that is the nature of the city, like the civics of the city, you have to make that time, right? And at the least, vote, right? I think you would probably know this probably better than most. I mean, it's a paltry number that show up to the polls, given the population low. And the fact that in Texas it's like 73 to 78% of the population is registered to vote. Like they are registered, they just don't show up.
That's right. Well, even if you take out people with felonies and under 18 and those who just moved here and immigrants, you still have a city of 91,000 and less than 10,000 are going to show up to this election. Yeah. No. And on top of that, we've got the primary runoff later in May. So Texas has uniform elections, but we also have times that things need to stretch out. So people aren't going to know about the May the 4th election. We're having to say May the 4th be with you, and get that Star Wars gag in. Right. But people still aren't going to show up, and that's a challenge.
It is a challenge. I mean, and as a candidate, you have to obviously you understand that, right?
Right. That's the first thing I say anymore. especially when people are busy, working in the driveways and they don't want to talk to me.
Mm-hmm.
They're busy, especially Easter weekend, man.
Spring.
They were annoyed.
Yeah.
I said, hey, I just want to let you know there's an election coming up. They go, I know. I'm like, no, it's May 4th. It's May 28th. May 4th. There's two. Really?
Right.
Thanks. I'm like, you're welcome.
Right.
And sometimes get off my lawn. Okay, sorry.
Well, I give you kudos there, because that takes a lot of chutzpah, to just get out there and again, you're presenting yourself, you're making yourself a public figure, and
Yeah.
that, I admire that. I really, really do, because that's a lot. I don't know that I would ever put myself in that position.
Just a lot of self-introspection too.
Yeah. You have to be, right?
Yeah.
Right. All right. Well, let me see. Let's see how we're doing on time. We started a little early, right?
Just a little bit.
Just a little early.
Yeah, my kids decided in the spirit of April Fool's Day, which is the day we're recording this, to set my clocks forward. So I came here an hour early.
Yeah, that's funny. When did you realize that?
Just a while ago. I was
So
like,
when
oh
you
my
got
gosh,
here?
why am I here at 2:30? I was looking all around for this place.
That's funny. That's funny. Yeah. So I left the office. I wanted to make sure I was here on time, because you had mentioned that you had some stuff this afternoon, and I wanted to be, cognizant of that.
No, I'm catching you off guard.
Yeah, and I was like, hey, he's already here. That's pretty crazy.
Thanks for taking me here a little bit early.
No, absolutely. Happy to do it.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. Happy that you were able to, make the connection and spend the time with us here. So before we wrap, I do want to tell me one thing, and I asked this question the other day, and I really liked it, so I'm going to come back to it, all right? So one thing that you've done, either in your professional life or your personal life, that you felt so good about whatever it was that you accomplished in that job or in that project, that you would want to do that again. Like you felt so fulfilled, for lack of better terms, from that experience, that if you ever did that, that's the one thing you would go back and, okay, yeah, I want to do that again.
Yeah. Well, it's got to be ministry work.
Okay.
It has to be. There's nothing that touches eternity more, obviously. What we're doing here is tending the garden, but when you look at the overall picture, that's big. When you see somebody go from drug addiction and hopelessness to hope and productivity and worshiping God, it's an amazing transformation. If there's anything I'd want to do again, is to repeat that over and over and over again. And yeah, I do my share of ministry work on the side. I do. I fill the pulpit. I got a little house meeting we are pretty fond of. We open the Bible and we pray a lot. But you've got to take it from just orthodoxy to orthopraxy, they call it, and practice what you preach. Right. And so that's the one thing I'd want to do more often. I have a conviction about not making it a career. Now, not to run anybody in the ground that does make their money off of ministry. I think that serves an important role. But it can't be just that. So I haven't pursued that as a career. But I found a lot of meaning on the side and doing it out of the passion for my heart. And just like we are with the council, it's not going to pay a cent either. Mm-hmm. But again, if we're tending the garden here, if that's God's will for us, then we've got to do it. So, but nothing really jazzes me up more than sharing the gospel with somebody.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice. But again, they're very servant-oriented. And that's kind of, I come back to that theme again and again and again, because I think to a person, any of the candidates that I've spoken with have that in them, right? There's I refer to it as servant leadership, right? There's a and I mean, I didn't make that term up or anything like that, but that's what I frame it as.
Zig Ziglar's going to call you.
Zig. Oh, good old Ziggy boy. Yeah, I'm sure. Maybe Simon Sinek might, but I don't know about Zig. Anyway, but I think it's really important, and it's an important part of the process, in that you're putting yourself forth and as a public figure, but you're also saying, look, I'm here to help serve your needs, right?
Yeah.
I'm representative from that perspective.
Right, and not to proselytize, not to turn Leander into a Republican city, which, hey, I'm Republican, I'm conservative. I'm not going to make any bones about that.
I don't think anybody doesn't know that.
That's pretty
I think that's pretty clear.
Right, but I think it's been kind of a fear, like, no, wait, I'm for everybody. I've done this before.
Right. And I'm actually glad you brought that up, because that is something that I think a lot of people would look at and say, and it cuts both ways, right?
Sure
it does cut both ways. So,
and policy does matter, of course. But,
absolutely.
Yeah.
But if you're coming at it from a nonpartisan perspective, you can have partisan feelings, right? You can have partisan thoughts, but when it comes to actually serving in the role, you should pursue it from a nonpartisan perspective.
That's right.
You should be listening to everyone and not just a group that you may favor, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I honestly feel that way. You can paint yourself into whatever political corner that you want to, and have a fundamental understanding of policy and ideology, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong. It's the same as religion, in my opinion. It's the same as education, in my opinion. You're going to get color from that, but to grow, you must understand that listening comes first, and you have to take into account everybody's perspective, because that's the only way that you find community and unity at the end of the day. Again, community is unity, right? It's all part of that whole process. I'm no way have I ever thought that, my way's the right way or my way's the best way, right?
Well,
and I have
out.
my thoughts.
No,
but the point there is that, I want to try to at least take that into account, right? Like, there's things but I also realize that there's things that you want, and sometimes we're not going to necessarily be looking at that same issue with the same lens, right?
Exactly.
But in order to get to where we can both be comfortable with it, I have to take your perspective for a minute, and I would hope that you would take mine so that we could figure that out, right?
Well, and there's two types of people in the world, seekers and non-seekers, people who are seeking the truth, seeking the common ground, and those who are running from it, seeking themselves, right?
So, no, I think that's fair.
That's part of it, So if you're a seeker, you're a friend of mine. I don't care if you disagree with me, or if you're a socialist or Buddhist, or even if you're completely just not sure what you believe at all. That's fine. As long as you're seeking it, I will find common ground with you. And furthermore, I think, I think it was F. Scott Fitzgerald that said it, that the true test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in your mind simultaneously.
Right.
So I think you have to do that. You've got to step into the other person's shoes for a second.
Agreed.
Put your biases on the shelf.
Right.
Even if you're absolutely 100% right and got a Rush Limbaugh-like view on the world, just put it to the side for a second. Think, why does this person feel this way? Why is it important? And maybe learn something in the process. God forbid we do that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I currently work in a role supporting an analytical group, right? I'm business development, but they're analysts, right?
Right.
And so I have learned, I think I had a natural affinity for it, but now I'm better at it. It's to set aside those biases, right? You have to understand that it is a bias, right? Yeah. You can't take a sample set that's just the group that you're familiar with. You have to take your sample set, randomized across everything.
Even to prove your own hypothesis.
Even to prove your own hypothesis.
That's correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Excellent. Well, this has been fantastic. I really have enjoyed this conversation. I want to give you an opportunity to tell folks where they can find you. So, like your social medias, websites, etc. Where can people find more about Andy?
Yeah, Google me. Holler into your phone, say, "Hey Siri, find Andy Hogue." Find me on Facebook.
That's how I found you.
Yeah, it's easy. I could give you the URL, but why? Just find me on Facebook. Look for me. My number is everywhere. Go to the city council website. Look for the council biographies. Mine should be up shortly. But
okay,
we've got all our information up there. But yeah, I'm an easy man to find. I'm all over the place, being a communications director. So just Google me. I'm there.
Okay, I'll make sure, and because I usually do a little crawl when you're talking about that. So I'll put the actual URL up there.
We'll send it to you.
There you go. All right. Well, Andy, it has been truly a pleasure, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time here. Again, folks. The purpose of the Vote in Leander series is to just give you the opportunity to do what I just did and to hear the conversation just, person to person with the people who are presenting themselves again for your votes. So I hope this helps with that conversation. You can, of course, go to voteinleander.com. You can go to leaninleander.net. You find me on all of the social medias as well as podcasts. Subscribe. Like them, you get those alerts, and it definitely helps keep you at least informed of what's going on here. We'll run the series. I think I've got potentially 2 more interviews to do, but as soon as I can get everybody who will participate done, we'll put them all in one spot so you can kind of go and find everything in one place.
Nice.
So I appreciate it again, Andy. Thank you so much for your time. And for you out there, thank you for taking a minute to listen to what I have to say and what we have to say. And again, Andy pointed it out earlier. You got baseball practice and other stuff. So I find the podcast is really easy to listen to on the drive into work.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I usually try to keep it right at about a 30-minute time frame. So there you go.
Yeah, or just kind of put 2 times on there. Let's start really fast.
Yeah, you could do that. Anyway, thank you again, and thank you, and we'll see you at the next one.